Today I'm going to show you some Cypher camera spots on the new map Ascent. These spots are a compilation of almost 24 hours of me walking around in the new map in a custom game and asking the question, can I put a camera there? First up, I'm going to go over two new glitch discoveries / features that I found. The first one is a boosted spot using 2 players. I discovered that you can stand on a pixel or something by the barrel here. For this to work, you need to have the bottom player walk up to the box, align flush with the box, and jump, barely tapping right to align the player on the box. Then the bottom player needs to crouch and allow the player that is going to be boosted to jump on his head. This takes some practice, but you get locked into the corner and able to stand there and jump on the barrel and get on the ledge. I haven't found any use of this glitch anywhere else. I think it has to do with the roundness of the barrel and creating a pixel that you can actually walk on. Personally, I don't think this should be patched if it's not intended, but I think the camera should be patched out or at least not be able to place high enough to see into the enemy spawn. From this position, you can also place a camera on the shingles of the roof in defender spawn. This camera I think shouldn't be patched out in my opinion because it doesn't provide a glimpse of the spawn. This next bug / feature I discovered has to do with head glitch cameras and panning downward. Right now you can see Jet's head and you can see Jet on the minimap, and we have a clear vision of her. Next, I'm going to pan the camera down and put the spot where Jet's head is at in the corner of the camera. Next, we'll take a look at their screen to see what they see. Here's the POV of the player at the choke. Even when the player zooms in with the op, you can barely see the red blinking light, let alone the camera. Now when the camera pans upward, you can see the full camera, but when we pan the camera back down again, all you can see is a faint blinking light. After getting those discoveries out of the way, let's get into the cameras. Any pixel angle camera or head glitch camera can use the same camera panning as discussed right before this. These first camera spots require this box jump here. To make this, you need to run, jump, and crouch at the same time. First camera is going to be placed next to this utility box on the wall. For this camera, I'm aligning my placement with the edge of the little cutout in the wall until I see the camera's placeable. Then I jump place it to hide it by the utility box. The second box camera is a good post-plant camera angle to watch rafters. This camera doesn't allow the camera to pan and shoot the main choke sadly, but it does give a deeper vision of the site. The third camera is good for watching both chokes on a site, but the camera is blocked by the cannon and doesn't allow for the actual site to be viewed. This camera is very hidden and it's hard to spot unless you know to look for it. The fourth box camera, a lot like the first camera, hides itself by using its surroundings as well as hiding by using its height. This is a pretty simple camera but rarely gets spotted because people neglect to look into that corner. With a sage wall, you can also place the camera higher. The fifth box camera is pretty self-explanatory. It can be placed on this wall here and gives a clear vision of the choke and the site. But for this camera, you want to watch out for placing the camera a little bit too far back because this can cause the camera's view to become obstructed as seen right now. This camera is another off-angle camera that people likely won't expect it being there. The sixth and final box camera is one that's pretty situational. This camera can be placed from on a site and give you vision into a connector and tree room. I would use this camera when enemies have taken mid control and you need to see if they're taking catwalk or trying to push into your spawn and take rafters to attack A from the flank. The Rafters Cheaty Cloth Camera. This camera is one that will be patched out of the game. If you just like this type of camera, then feel free to skip ahead. This camera uses the white cloth in front of the camera as a one-way mirror. You can't actually see the person, but if you look at the minimap, you can see the sage is walking around. This allows the enemy to never know that you see them. I really do hope this camera gets patched out of the game soon, as it just kind of ruins the integrity of the game. Here is another cheaty cloth camera. As you can see, we have the sage standing in the choke, and we'll be able to see her on the minimap once we place the camera. This camera is exactly the same as the previous camera, but in a different location. This cheaty cloth camera is placed on some small scaffolding that the cloth is in front of. Now as the sage moves around, we can see her moving on the minimap, and she can't see the camera at all. Although it isn't shown, she could walk up to the site and still be seen by the camera. The big box one-way camera. I showed this camera off at the beginning of the video as an example of the glitch discovery involving head glitch cameras and panning downward. For this camera, you need to line up on the rafters and then line the camera up so the top of the wing of the camera is aligned with the brown frame. If placed correctly, this camera provides a great view of the players walking by the choke as shown. This camera can be tilted downward to allow the camera to be undetectable. A sight pixel angle camera. This camera, when placed correctly, will show only a pixel of the player moving past the chokeway on the sight. This camera is very sneaky as the FOV of the camera is only a few pixels, and to the enemy the camera is only visible for a few seconds as they walk through the choke. If you tilt the camera like shown, it's even harder for the enemies to see the camera and it makes it easier for you to see the pixels changing. Under rafters one-way camera. This camera is placed under the rafters at the bottommost spot available on the beam. You line the camera up with the back wall white tarp. You want to be just left of the crease as shown. Here you can just barely see Jet's head, and to the Jet, she can only see the red blinking light. If you tilt the camera downward and put Jet's head at the top of your screen, you can create a one-way head glitch camera, just like the big box camera shown previously. A-Wine camera. This is an after-round camera that you can place in the A-Wine section. You can use this camera to watch people as they are about to enter the choke. There isn't much to this camera, but if you place the camera, I would walk back onto the site and hide and wait to use the camera. Do it quickly so the enemies can't hear you open the camera and shoot it right away. Next, we're moving on to the B site. These cameras are some of my favorites as the angles on the B site provide a creative location for the cameras to be placed. B spawn head glitch camera. This camera provides an angle into B main and only shows a pixel of the player walking by. You need to line your crosshair just below this white circle on the piping and then place the camera. After that, you can just barely see the Jet's head walking back and forth. This provides vision for anyone walking onto the B site. With this camera, you can tilt the camera down, like shown, and turn it into an invisible camera. You can see the enemy, but all they can see is a faint blinking light. B site to B main pixel angle camera. This camera is one of my favorites. With the enemies walking onto the site, they would rarely ever look up at this camera. This is a pixel angle camera, so it will only show the enemy walking by the angle, and then it'll show the enemy once they push through the choke. As you can see, we can barely see the Jet walking by the pixel, and we can even turn the camera to the left a little bit and make it harder for the Jet to even see the camera at all. B site rowboat camera. This camera will be patched out of the game as it is a glitch camera. This camera is also a pixel angle camera that will see anyone walk by through the choke as shown here. One use of this camera that I can think of is playing behind the boathouse, and as soon as you see anyone walk by the camera, peeking out and spraying them down. B site AC unit camera. This camera is a good scouting camera to see if anyone in B main is trying to take the orb. I wouldn't recommend this camera to solely watch if they pushed up into B main, as there are a few blind spots to this camera, but if you want to use this camera to see if people are near the orb, then it's the perfect camera as it shows right before the box and it will show if people have hopped onto the box to take the orb. It also has a good clearance over the entirety of B site. B site post-plant sewer camera. This camera is a bug camera and will likely be taken out of the game in the upcoming patches. If you plant in the light of the site of the camera, then it's a great camera to watch if the enemies are actually defusing or not. The camera can be placed on both sides of the sewer, but the left side camera is stuck there for the rest of the round. So in my opinion, only use the right side for the camera. You can also hide in the boathouse back here, but just a reminder, all the walls are sprayable and you can't hide in the corner by the boat as you stick out way too far. B site sewer post-plant camera number 2. What do you know? The other sewer is also bugged and you can place a camera on the back right wall. The back wall is missing and we can see the floating world, so we can't place a camera there. This camera does give very good vision over the entire site for a post-plant scenario. You can't shoot through it sadly. B site back wall bush camera. This camera is a head glitch camera to watch people as they walk through the choke. Although the actual vision is actually cluttered of the camera, you can watch the minimap and see as the people walk into the site. For the enemies, this camera is very, very hard to spot because of how cluttered the area is where the camera is at. B-site tree camera. At first I thought you needed an exact lineup for this camera by hopping on the box, but you can place the camera from the pathway where I was originally standing. You can place the camera to watch people as they walk into the site, as it gives a great vision of the entire site from its high vantage point. But you can also see if people are lingering around the hut outside of B main. Next, we're moving on to attacking cameras. As Cypher on attack, your main two jobs are to lurk and to watch flanks. These cameras are set up in line with your jobs. A lobby after start camera. This camera is a great camera to observe enemies as they walk through the A choke and try to push to get information into your spawn. This camera stops them from doing that without anyone noticing. The higher you place the camera, the longer the enemies take to notice it. A lobby bonsai camera. This camera is very finicky and requires a little bit of practice. You need to hop on the boxes and align on the ground with the triangle in the pavement. Then align your crosshair in the center of the ring on the piping as shown. Then you need to jump and place the camera at the height of your jump. You can place the camera right after the walls drop. A lobby low profile flank watch camera. This camera is a head glitch camera involving the railing and placing the camera just a little bit out of bounds. You line up on the table and then align your crosshair along the wall. This camera is a great camera to place during the buy phase if your team plans to take middle control or push B and you want to see if the A players are flanking you. A lobby broken house camera. This camera is a very cool camera, as I'm sure they didn't intend for you to place the camera here, because there's only a few pixels where the camera becomes placeable. You can use this camera to watch as A players try to flank you and push mid or into your spawn. Attacking spawn B tree flank watch camera. This camera is placed on the tree limb here and can be used to watch as the B players try to take map control. Attacking spawn B flank gauntlet. I call this a gauntlet as I have too many cameras here in the same location and they all do the same thing. You can place this camera on a pole here. All of the cameras are meant to watch the players flanking from B into mid or into your spawn. This camera watches if the B players push too far up toward your spawn or if they try to take back middle control. The next camera is the same thing, just a little bit further back, and you can place it on the red pole. And then again further back, you find another red pole that you can place the camera on. The final camera can be placed on the back of the attacker's spawn, on the back side of this pillar. This camera is very hidden and will likely never be seen. Attacking spawn A flank watch. This camera watches the top middle flank as well as the A flank. This camera can be placed on the back wall of the attacker's spawn and is very hidden from the enemy players because they would likely never look up here for any reason. As you can see, the pine tree hides the camera very well, and the people walking by from A won't expect a thing. B lobby flank and orb watch camera. This camera can be placed at the start of the round and at a location that no one would ever look. You can also use this camera to watch as people flank from B main or see if people are grabbing the orb in B main. As shown, you can see people walking around the corner in B main using this camera. You can also place the camera a little bit more left and down to create a head glitch camera. This still watches the orb. It also shows a pixel of the enemy's head moving when they walk by. I would use this camera to deter people from pushing up in B main and trying to be sneaky. B main to B site camera. This camera is a great aggressive camera that allows you to see the entirety of the boathouse and a lot of angles that people like to hide on the B site. You need to be in front of the rightmost fish box or you'll be too far away to place the camera correctly. Then you need to move the camera around until you see the building through the window and then align the camera and jump place the camera on the wall. As you can see, the camera gives you a ton of intel about what's going on into the B site. Middle catwalk to top middle camera. This camera is a skill jump camera that takes some practice to get used to. You need to clear middle as well as catwalk to place this camera. The point of this camera is to place it as high as possible in middle so you can clear it as much as possible. If placed correctly, like I did on the second try, you can clear out the entirety of middle cubby and you won't have to worry about people being tucked inside there. The first go, you saw the camera I couldn't see as well into the cubby, but now even when someone stands in the corner facing away from the camera, you can still see their back of their shoulder on the camera. Attacking middle camera, clearing the path. With this camera, you can place this after the walls have dropped. This camera is good for seeing if players have pushed up middle or are holding angles and they're trying to kill you. Attacking middle camera, A lobby / top mid flank watcher. This camera is one you can place either after the round has started or by taking middle and jumping on the box to get a higher angle. This camera is a great flank watch camera, and you can even see the orb as well as you can see if players are pushing up from A and trying to flank. Thanks for watching. If you would, follow my Twitch channel where you can see me rage like this.
Like, how the fuck is the wall gonna break? Randomly!
Also, if you liked the video, subscribe. Next video, I'll be doing a Cypher one-way cage guide, all of which have never been shown before.